I never imagined that such a normal evening could hide such a dangerous secret. It was my husband Luca's 50th birthday. The restaurant was full of friends and family who came to celebrate with us. The soft lights created a warm and welcoming atmosphere, while the background music, a delicate jazz melody, almost seemed to accompany our laughter and animated conversations. I felt relaxed, a little too much perhaps. The wine had dissolved all my tension, leaving me with a pleasant sensation of lightness. I looked at the faces of the people around me, familiar smiling faces, and thought about how lucky I was to have such a close-knit family. But there was one face among all that put me in a state of subtle agitation, that of Carlo, my father-in-law. If this story is intriguing you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes and find out what will happen. Carlo had always been a charismatic man, a commanding presence in every room he entered. With his dark, penetrating eyes and confident manner, there was something about him that had always known how to make me uncomfortable. It wasn't the first time I sensed tension between us, but that evening it seemed more intense. I noticed how his eyes rested on me, lingering a little too long, with an intensity that made me blush. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that maybe it was just the wine that was making me see non-existent things, but my instincts told me the opposite. While Paolo got up to go and greet an old friend, I found myself alone next to Carlo. He came over with a smile, his eyes locked on mine, and asked, "Are you having fun?" His voice was deep and friendly, but there was an edge to it that made me tremble. "Very," I replied, trying to keep my face light, but he didn't look away, continuing in a slightly softer tone. "It's a special evening, in many ways." Those words, spoken like that, seemed to have a double meaning that I couldn't ignore. I felt my heart beat faster, and a warm sensation rose to my cheeks. The music changed, a sweet waltz that invited you to dance. Some couples got up to join the dance floor, and Carlo looked at me with a faint smile, as if he had read my thoughts. He held out his hand, his fingers slightly curled, inviting. "Will you come dance with me?" he asked me. I felt caught between two fires, the desire to keep up appearances and the growing awareness of that subtle, electric tension between us. I looked for Paolo, but he was still engrossed in the conversation. With a mixture of hesitation and curiosity, I accepted his hand. His fingers were warm and strong, and as I stood up, I felt a shiver run down my spine. We got up and headed to the dance floor. Carlo took my hand with a delicacy that I had never noticed before, and we began to move to the rhythm of the music. Every step seemed to reduce the distance between us. Every movement was an excuse to get a little closer. I felt embarrassed, but also inexplicably fascinated. His gaze never left mine, and every now and then our bodies touched, causing me an emotion that I couldn't decipher. "Do I dance better than Paolo?" he asked me at one point, with a light laugh. I smiled nervously, trying to extinguish any tension. "You're both good," I replied, but my voice trembled slightly, betraying the emotion of the moment. His hand slid across my back, resting with a confidence I never imagined. He grabbed me by the waist, and I felt the heat of his body against mine. His voice, low and calm, crept into my ear, his breath warm on my skin. "You look gorgeous tonight." Those words hit me like lightning, and a shiver ran through me from head to toe. I felt trapped between embarrassment and an unexpected emotion, something I didn't want to admit to myself. The music ended, but not the tension between us. "Sorry," I said quickly, finding an excuse to walk away. I headed towards the bathroom, my heart pounding. I closed the door behind me and leaned against the sink, trying to collect myself. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my thoughts were a whirlwind of confusing emotions. I couldn't understand how I ended up in that situation, but something in me had changed. Suddenly I heard the door open and my heart skipped a beat. I turned around quickly and saw Carlo. His gaze was intense, determined, and I felt a wave of adrenaline rush through me. "You shouldn't have come in," I whispered, but my voice was shaky and lacked conviction. He approached, leisurely, his eyes never leaving mine. "I couldn't let you go like that," he replied, his voice so close, so intimate. I found myself trapped between the sink and its magnetic presence. His scent was enveloping, and I could feel his breath getting closer. "We can't do this," I said, but my tone lacked strength, as if part of me didn't really want to object. His hand brushed my arm, and the touch felt like it was burning on my skin, as if every nerve was on fire. "Think of us, only us," he said calmly, his voice filled with a confidence that made me tremble. Those words struck me as a truth that I didn't want to accept, and for a moment I felt transported, attracted by that forbidden emotion. Suddenly someone knocked on the door, a female voice, a cousin of Paolo's. "You are here?" he asked, and at that moment everything stopped. Carlo quickly walked away, and without saying anything went out a side door, leaving me alone with my heart pounding and my emotions suffocating me. I looked at myself in the mirror, trying to regain my composure. My cheeks were red, my eyes shone with a light I didn't recognize. I tried to breathe deeply, to convince myself that nothing had happened, that everything was just a misunderstanding. When I returned to the table, Paolo welcomed me with a warm smile. I sat down next to him, trying to act normal, but there was a turmoil inside me that I couldn't turn off. Every time I met Carlo's gaze, I felt that tension grow again, like a flame that didn't want to go out. I tried to avoid it, to focus on Paolo and our friends, but it was impossible. His presence was like a magnet, and I felt drawn in a way I couldn't control. Towards the end of the evening, while everyone was toasting and laughing, Carlo approached me discreetly. "Let's talk about this outside," he whispered, his tone firm and confident. I hesitated, knowing it would be dangerous, but eventually I got up, making an excuse to leave. In the courtyard, the night was cool and silent. The stars twinkled above us. Carlo was there, a few steps away from me, his gaze as intense as always. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice cracking with 1,000 emotions. I felt the weight of my words, of my confusion, of my fear. "Because you want it too," he replied, his voice low, and his gaze seemed to pierce my soul. Those words struck me as a truth I didn't want to accept. I felt his hand touch my face, and I closed my eyes, fighting my own feelings. I felt like I was on a precipice, poised between right and desire. But before that assisi, if something happened, the sound of a door opening brought us back to reality. Someone was leaving, and Carlo walked away with one last intense look, leaving me with a heavy heart and a head full of unanswered questions. I went back inside, trying to appear normal, but something inside me had changed. I felt trapped in a web of emotions and secrets that I didn't know how to handle. Paolo took my hand, unaware of everything, and I smiled, trying to mask the internal chaos. "What would you have done in my place? Reply in the comments." The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions and doubts. Every time I ran into Carlo during family lunches or meetings, the tension between us seemed to grow, like an invisible thread that kept us tied. Every smile, every stolen glance fueled that forbidden fire that I tried to put out without success. I found myself reflecting on my choices, on the consequences that a false step could have had on my life, and that of Paolo. One evening, while I was alone in the kitchen, lost in my thoughts, Paolo came in and hugged me from behind, whispering to me how happy he was to have me by his side. That moment shook me deeply. I realized that Paolo's love was true, authentic, and that I couldn't afford to destroy it over a passing emotion, no matter how strong it was. The reality was that there were too many hearts at stake, too many lives that would have been destroyed if I had listened to that part of me that wanted Carlo. I decided to distance myself. I stopped searching for his eyes, to allow my thoughts to wander towards him. It was difficult. Every day was a fight against myself, but I had to do it, for everyone's good. Carlo seemed to understand. His stares became less insistent, and over time the tension faded. There remained a subtle regret, a what-if that accompanied me in moments of loneliness. But I knew I had done the right thing. In the end, I understood that true love is not just overwhelming passion or irrepressible desire, but also sacrifice, respect, and the will to protect what you hold most dear. And as I looked at Paolo, sitting on the sofa with a smile, I understood that despite everything, he was my choice, my true home. Carlo, however, did not disappear completely from my life. Family reunions were still frequent, and every time I met him, there was always a trace of that connection. It was no longer the burning fire we had felt that evening, but an ember that burned softly, a silent agreement between us that that story would remain unfinished. Over time, I learned to live with this, accepting that certain emotions cannot be completely erased, but only put aside. One Sunday afternoon during a family lunch, Carlo gave me a look that had the flavor of a farewell. It was a look full of understanding, of regret, but also of acceptance. He understood that our time, that suspended time made up of emotions and possibilities, had passed. And I smiled, a smile that contained all our unspoken words, all the repressed desires and all the choices made for the love of the people we had next to us. The future I was building with Paolo was based on certainties, on solid foundations that gave me serenity. Every now and then, when I found myself alone, I allowed myself to think back to Carlo and what could have been. But they weren't sad thoughts, rather a bittersweet memory of an adventure that never happened. Every time Paolo hugged me, every time he smiled at me, I knew that I had chosen the best for me, for us. And so life went on with its ups and downs, with its simple days and its more intense ones. Carlo remained part of my family, but the history we might have had remained buried, like a hidden treasure that no one would ever find. In the end, it wasn't courage that held me back, but sincere love for my husband, and the knowledge that true love is what makes you feel at home, what makes you feel protected, despite all the temptations in the world. Paolo and I continued to build our life together, and every time I looked into his eyes, I found my peace. And Carlo, deep down, remained the memory of a heartbeat that had made me feel alive, but which didn't have the power to destroy what was really important, our love. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write "I want the sequel" in the comments. If you liked the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of the next publications. Thanks.